don't block the path of inquiry. Don't lay down rules that make it impossible for people to ask important questions.
Welcome to the Thought Stretchers podcast, where we hope to stretch your thinking about important issues in education through rich inquiry. My name is Drew Perkins, and I'm your host for these conversations for complexity and nuance. In this episode, you'll hear my conversation with Gabriela Delgado de Fina and Emily Waugh, and I hope I've pronounced both of those correctly, both assistant heads of school at the A+ World Academy. This academy is a truly unique 10-month voyage program where 72 students live, learn, and operate a fully rigged ship across the Atlantic. We talked about the program's educational philosophy, centered on their 5 goals for global leadership, which balance academics with global studies, communal living, maritime training, and reflective learning. We discussed the unique logistics of a school at sea, from crew rotations and extremely limited internet to the mandatory requirement for all students to participate in sailing the ship. Finally, we explore the challenges they face, including the ongoing transition to a project-based learning curriculum with limited onboard research resources, and the complex process of formally assessing non-academic growth pillars like teamwork, communal living, and essential maritime skills. Before we get to the conversation, I'd like to remind you to visit Thought Stretchers Education at wegrowteachers.com. We are dedicated to helping schools and intellectually rigorous educators better prepare students for the modern world through our professional development services, specializing in project-based learning, knowledge-rich inquiry, and other instructional mindsets and practices like differentiated instruction, enlightenment civics, and AI in education. Please visit wegrowteachers.com to learn more about our on-site or virtual workshops and online courses. And if you like what you hear on this podcast, please do us the favor of rating, reviewing, and sharing wherever you think that would be helpful. Lastly, our PBL Grow 26 Summer Professional Learning event is in early bird registration through the end of February. This event is open to a limited number of registrants, and it looks like we're filling up quickly. So if you're interested in that, I'd suggest you register to save your seat sooner rather than later. Again, you can find that at wegrowteachers.com, and you'll see a link at the top of the page. Now I hope you enjoy my conversation with Gabby and Emily from the truly unique A+ World Academy. I am with Gabby and Emily, and we're going to talk about A+ World Academy and school on a boat and all the things that might surround that unique idea. But I want to give them an opportunity to say hello and to introduce themselves and maybe give a little bit of background. Gabby, let's start with you. Neither of you are on the boat right now. You, Gabby, I think are in Colombia. So go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Emily.
Sure. So I'm Gabby. I'm one of the assistants head of school at A+. I've been working with A+ World Academy for 8 years now. So I sailed for 4 years. I started as the world languages teacher and then moved on to AP seminar and other classes as well. I was dean on board for the past couple of years, and then now I'm assistant head of school and I work from land. So we do join the ship every now and then. This academic year, we're not going to do it, but the past couple of years we have joined for at least one sail, which is great. But yes, it's weird being a teacher without being with the students, but it is an amazing program. And it has been, well, when I first started, I thought I was going to join for only a year. And there's a reason why I've stayed here for so long. It is incredibly rewarding to work in a program like this. Yeah.
And before we get to Emily, tell me a little bit about your background as a student. Like, where did you go to school? What was your schooling like? Would you say it was traditional, non-traditional? How would you sort of characterize the experience and the instruction that you experienced?
Sure. So I'm from Venezuela, from an island in Venezuela. It's called Margarita. And I did go to a school that right now is international. It wasn't international when I was there. Right now it's IB. But I would say that for a private school in Venezuela, it was pretty progressive, even though we weren't using those terms back then, if that makes sense. But there was a lot of project-based learning. It was completely bilingual. We did travels to many different places every year, and a lot of service learning as well. So I'm actually very grateful to have had the kind of like the schooling opportunity or the education opportunity that I had before, because I think that opened up the space for also me to know a lot of what I'm doing right now. It was from my experience back then. Yeah.
And you were a teacher. Where did you do your teacher preparation?
Yeah, no, so I started world languages, and I was working with translation back home, and then I was working with education, but in marketing. I wasn't a teacher, so my first job as a teacher was with A+. Yeah.
Okay. Emily, how about you?
So I joined the program back in 2017, and I also could not have imagined that I was going to be here for for as long as the two of us have stayed. Yes. So I started as the literature and composition teacher, and then transitioned into a leadership role on the ship as deans. Gabby and I were deans on ship together, and then we both transitioned off ship to help support from land. And I think we both miss the ship a lot. We love the fact that we can have apartments again and plants and be with family and friends and all of that, which is wonderful. But we do miss it. I mean, all of us are in education for the students. That's the whole point. So it is different in an environment like this to be working remotely essentially for most of the year. So it is a different type of work, but it is exciting to be part of a program like this and to have the opportunities that we have. So yeah, it's been good. I think we both learned a lot from being part of an organization like this. Yeah.
And as you said before we hit record, you're in Kansas, and we'll talk about the roles that you both are playing, and obviously remotely at this point. But what was your experience like as a student growing up? Where was that? What was that like?
So I'm an Army brat, so we moved around. So I grew up going to DoD schools, and then so essentially public schools. And then for high school, I just at a normal public school as well. So that was my upbringing in education. My mom is an educator as well. So we also got a lot of educating at home, a lot of workbooks over the summer, all of that. But I think it was very more traditional mindset when it came to education. I didn't have the same experience as Gabby did with more progressive models.
Okay.
So I've been learning a lot too, like I said, from doing this. Yes, very different.
And your teacher preparation, what was that like?
Right. So I went to the Naval Academy. So it was Navy, and then I had to get a medical discharge and then transitioned and working into education. So I started with ESL, with doing TEFL and went abroad, and then really fell in love with teaching and education. And then got licensed in Massachusetts, and then found my way to A+ World Academy as a literature and comp teacher, and then have never left ever since. So yes.
Okay. So let's, I want to, talk about the program just in general, and then maybe we can drill down on some of the instructional pieces that you use and how that works, because obviously it's very experiential.
Yes.
And Gabby, you mentioned project-based learning. We do a lot of project-based learning work. So maybe, Gabby, you can start, perhaps kind of give us the overview. What is the A+ World Academy? What is the experience? What is it meant to do? Those kinds of things.
Yes. Well, the entire program is based on the My 5 to Global Leadership philosophy, which has 5 pillars, of course. And they are academics, communal living, reflective learning, global studies, and self-training. So the whole idea of the program is that all of those pillars are of the same level of importance for us, because it has, I think that's what gives us the holistic approach to education and for the students to actually have a general growth. And that's why we have a class that is mandatory for all students that is called Self, Systems, and Society, which is kind of like where all the learning of the entire program comes together in just that course. And they do a lot of debates and reflection and discussions. They do conflict resolution, because there's a lot of conflict on board as well when you have 72 students sharing one room,
Yeah.
Everything. So there are a lot of things that come into place there. And yes, the entire program falls into that sense. And then we go to different projects for each specific course. When it comes to academics, they do self-training every day that they're on board. They do 2 hours of day watch, 2 hours of night watch. The whole idea of the program is that the ship is their home and we take care of our home. So we clean the ship every morning. They work in the kitchen in galley every 10 days with rotation. So the day that they work in galley, they don't have watch, but they are pretty busy throughout the entire school year. Pretty amazing for them to also realize what they're capable of at such a young age. If that, yeah.
So, Emily, can you explain, the process? And I mean, again, they're on a ship. How many students we have, how many adults we have, how long is this experience? Where do they start? Where do they end? Just the sort of logistics of it.
Yeah, so we have 72 students. So there's a lot of people, like what Gabby pointed out, sharing the same space because they all sleep, eat, class, everything in the same space, which is called the Banyer in the ship. So we start every year in Kristiansand, Norway. That's the home port of Sorlandet, the ship that this program is on. So we start and end there every single year. For the voyage, for the last few years, we've been doing the top of the 8. I don't know if people are familiar with the sailing winds, but it's essentially a figure 8 in the Atlantic.
I'm going to guess not that many people are familiar with the sailing winds.
Yes. So 1 year since we joined, it was actually, I think it was your first year, Gabby, right? When we did the full 8.
Yeah.
So 1 year we did do the full 8, which was incredible. It was amazing. We got to do 4 crossings. It was a very unique and special year doing that. But most years we do the top of the 8. So we stay in the Northern Hemisphere typically. So it's just a big loop that we do. So we're on the ship. She's an old ship built in 1927, and she was built for the Norwegian Navy to do sail training on, and she's fully rigged, which means that everything is done by hand, which is really unique nowadays because so much is automated on ships included. So it does create a really special learning environment for the students with that, because it requires every single person on the ship in order to operate. So I think we're one of the few schools where you call all hands and everyone has to drop whatever they're doing and run up on deck to help. For the adults, we have the maritime crew and the academic crew. For the academic crew, we have 5 teachers on board at a time. We have 10 total, but we have rotations. So we have 2 teams, both academic and maritime crew, and they rotate throughout the year. So we have 5 teachers currently. We have a doctor, a medical officer, and we have the dean, the ship dean. That's the academic crew. And then for the maritime crew, you have the captain, you have the officers, the deck crew, you have the bosun, chief engineer, galley team, all of that. And so that's collectively the crew, all the adults on the ship. I think what I'm missing. Gabby, what am I missing?
So how long is this voyage?
Oh, it's 10 months.
10 months.
10 months.
And I'm assuming there's some stops.
Yes, so we start, like I said, in Kristiansand, and we do the top loop. So over 10 months, we typically start by going to some European ports. And then once we start heading down south, we go to Gran Canaria, we go to then to Cabo Verde, and from there we do the first crossing, so the southern crossing over to the side of the world. And then, yeah, exactly. And then we start working our way back up. So the voyage plan, it typically stays about the same every year with some ports that change, which helps with the development of the activities we're doing in ports and connections with local organizations. And we have 2 ports throughout the year as well that are the parent ports. And those are the 2 moments where the students have a holiday and the family, spend time with family. We do parent-teacher conferences, all of that. So it is different because when you're sailing, every day is a work day, essentially. So it's a different experience for the students because they don't have a winter break or a spring break or anything that's maybe designed over certain holidays. They don't have that. There aren't federal holidays when we're sailing. So that's different as well. Also for new crew members who aren't used to that lifestyle. So those are the 2 moments throughout the year, which are the breaks, are the 2 parent ports.
And so you've got, obviously the two of you are working remotely. Are you teaching as well? Do we have teachers who are teaching remotely? And obviously that means they have internet. What does that look like from, if you've got 5 teachers on board and those are rotating,
Right.
just academically, what does that look like?
Right. So internet is always a struggle that we have.
I would imagine.
Yeah. Yes. So we have internet when it comes to safety of the ship. So getting weather reports, we've got satellite, all of that. But when it comes to more day-to-day usage, we do try to limit that. The students don't have any access to internet at all. And then the crew does have access, but it's limited. So it's more for emails, that type of thing. So the crew, the academic crew that's on land, is they're supporting the crew that's on the ship. So they're helping with curriculum development. They're helping if maybe there's a student that needed to go home due to an illness or something happened with the family, of supporting that student with their home, with work, or meeting them with whatever is needed. So it is a lot of help. This is actually the first year we've had rotations for the academic crew. Before, we had the same group that was on for the full 10 months. And there are pros and cons to both, but it's definitely a really wonderful move forward when it comes to also sustainability of people working in the program, because it takes a lot out of you doing it for 10 months year after year.
I would imagine. Yeah, it's pretty intense. So the academic program, and I'm looking at your I think you called it the 5 goals. So academics, global studies, communal living, maritime training, and reflective learning. Lots to unpack there. You have sort of junior year students, senior year students, and gap year students. And obviously, well, it seems obvious to me that those students will have different needs and will have, some of them may have learned certain things that others haven't. So is each year, each sort of I don't know, voyage, if that's the right word, is it unique in terms of the academic curriculum and what you're intending to teach, because the student makeup is different and where they are in their learning journey and those kinds of things?
Yeah. So every year is different. I would say completely, not only academically, because you're getting a whole new student body, sometimes new staff members as well, which means that, of course, you have different personalities, different needs, and the whole community will look different. So that's one of the things that we also focus on a lot, because every year we build a community from scratch, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that sense for us to build a solid environment to start the learning process as soon as possible, because we only have 1 year with the students. And when it comes to academics, that's why we have a range of classes for each subject area that the students can choose. And usually they have classes that are more on the lower level, and then you have others that are more on the higher level for them to be able to choose according to their academic path. Because then the other thing is that since we're in international schools, we do have students from many different parts of the world. So actually, around 50% of our student body is from Norway, and then the other 50% is from, again, different parts of the world, many of the United States, which makes it really easy with the curriculum that we have now. But we have students from Brazil, Mexico, China, different parts of Europe. So we try to leave it as open, the course selection for them, so that they are able to be successful with the academic path, and this is not kind of an obstacle in their academic path for either coming back to their previous school or going to university afterwards, or whatever they decide to do academic wise. And we are now moving forward to create a more project-based curriculum. That's something that our head of school, Jeff Joyce, have been pushing for, and we all agree, and we're all on board with that idea. They actually port quest right now, which is a research project that they need to do at least 5 ports throughout the school year that the students need to do. And it is pretty amazing what has happened this year. Of course, it's the first year that we're doing it, so we're also seeing a lot of errors that we need to deal with and improve. And that's what it's kind of like a 5-year plan. It's not fully definite yet, but working towards to get to being a fully school and not using AP at a later point, but we're not there yet, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So I'm curious, I mean, as we were talking before we hit record, I was saying that we do professional development, and project-based learning is one of the main areas. And I think there's some really important reasons, and there's real value to doing project-based learning and doing it well. And then there's some ways in which it can, and I would say too often, does get implemented really poorly, and there's some real problems, gaps in learning, teaching. So I'm curious why, if you can articulate why it is that you A+ World Academy wants to move and use project-based learning. What's the sort of perceived value there, and how do you describe what that looks like? And as you mentioned, some of the things maybe that you've realized, we have to do better on this or better on that, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, to start, I think one of the discussions that we have been having a lot is that we are a very progressive program when it comes to the life on board and the holistic approach to education. Again, like our priority is not only academics. We have all these other things that we focus on. So the curriculum that we have, even though it's good, like the AP curriculum is a good curriculum if you can apply it well. It is skill-based, all of these things. But when you apply it to a program where the students need to do so much stuff when it comes to other responsibilities and duties in that same day, it doesn't align that much to the life on board and the general goal that we have for the students at the end of the school year. For example, one of the things is that we go to all these different ports and we're doing activities at ports, and it's really difficult to include the learning process during these activities at port with the curriculum and the content that they need to go through when it comes to academics in class. So if we could merge those, the learning process would be way deeper when it comes
more enriched.
Only content, but also how to apply the content that you're learning, and that's a discrepancy. Is that a word in English?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. That's a discrepancy that we're finding right now with our curriculum and the rest of the things the students do on board, or the rest of the responsibilities that the students have on board. So that's something that we want to lower by moving towards a project-based learning curriculum. One of the things, for example, we started with a sport quest, which is completely, the students are leading that process. It is a research project that they need to do at 5 different ports. They need to present that. They have this inquiry-based research, but one of the difficulties that we're finding is they don't have internet. So it's hard for them to they don't have internet, they don't have a library. So you have the information that you get at the port. And then if they want to complement that information, it's really difficult for them. They have very short time because even though we included this, but they're still needing to take their classes. They still need to do the other responsibilities. So we're finding that they're not going as in-depth as we would like them to go with their research projects. Something that we're trying to change when it comes to schedule for this upcoming school year, to actually allocate more time to allow them to be successful with those projects. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I don't know if I'm missing something there.
No, Emily, maybe you can speak to this, and or either of you, of course. But what are some examples of projects that students are engaging in? If you can remember or recall or describe some of those, and as part of that, one of the things that I talk a lot about, and again, we work in project-based learning, and there's sort of ongoing conversation, debate, argument between something that's more traditional in teaching and then something that might be more constructivist or progressive, that kind of thing. Project-based learning certainly is less traditional, but I also think that there's a real valid criticism of more progressive education insofar as that there's sort of a minimization or lack of attention to things like actual knowledge that the students, need to learn.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will say, well, they can just Google it. And of course they can Google it, but is that what we really want? Others might say, well, they don't need the knowledge now, they can learn it later. We can always learn that kind of thing, that content knowledge, whatever that might be, but they really need these skills. I happen to think that's a false dichotomy, and I also happen to think that they do need the knowledge, and that teachers do need to actually be teaching. And so I sort of reject that false dichotomy. So coming back to the original question, thinking about like what are some of the projects that they might engage in, and how do you all think about how does the A+ World Academy at large think about the importance of knowledge and the role of the teacher in so far as they're teaching or not teaching or facilitating and guide on the side and all those kinds of the language.
Right. Yeah, it's hard because I do think it's something we're also debating and trying to figure out within our team as well, to be honest with you, about how to find that and how to find that balance and that blend. I think sometimes we can get caught in this idea where it's one or the other, this black or white idea, when it's quite often something in the middle. It's a gray. Yes. So that is something we're working through. And like Gabby said, that's part of the reason too why it's a long, many years plan of us trying different things and learning from them and trying to figure out what works best specifically in this setting, which is so different from a more traditional setup, and with the resources that we have as well, because it's such a different space. Because of that, we have some pretty incredible, unique resources. I mean, even just the ship herself is pretty amazing, but then we also don't have some of those resources that you would find in a more typical classroom.
Right.
One of them being internet and access to a library consistently. We have a library, but it's a closet is what it is. It's not an actual yes.
Yeah. We do use digital books though, like offline.
Yes, we do.
Digital,
that we can download.
It's not the same thing as having access to a full library or internet in general.
And librarians having access to the resource of a research librarian too. But yes, so for different projects the students have done so talking about iterations, with the research projects we had, when trying that, we really wanted students to select something that they were very passionate about, that they cared a lot about. So they were looking at things like, we had one student, when doing research project, looked at hotel room designs and why, like, what's the psychology, what are the different thinking behind these different designs, and then what can I can learn from going to these different ports and visiting these different hotels, and what differences am I finding? What are the reasons behind those differences? And starting at this initial question and then finding this this huge amount of information and how does that whole research process change and adapt, and what am I learning, not only the knowledge, but what am I learning through the process itself of going through the research. Some of the challenges we found with that is the fact that because we are just a one-year program and we're not able to build up to the students, we're getting these students from so many different backgrounds, educational backgrounds, with very incredibly varied skills and experience when it comes to research. So then how do we make sure that the students are equipped with the research skills that they need in order to start this from the very beginning? Because the idea when we were doing that specific project was that they were forming their initial research question over the summer so that they could start right off the bat with the ports, with doing the research. So that was one of the challenges we faced. And then with PortQuest as well was this idea of tying these different experiences directly to the curriculum. So changing, because before a lot of the port planning was done by the deans. It was me doing a lot of it for a while. But the idea was to shift that responsibility more to the teachers that are actually there on the ship working with the curriculum, so they can find, what are the different ways that we can enhance what we're doing in the classroom in these different ports. And then, when you mentioned the Googleable question, that's something that comes up a lot with what we're talking about. And this idea, how can we design these port quests to make it where the students, it isn't knowledge that the students can just easily Google for them. And then now we're also looking at how can we have the students design certain port quests as well. What does that look like? What's the framework for it? How do the teachers on the ship help support the students with that? So we really are in a phase of workshopping a lot of different ideas and seeing what works and doesn't work. So I think it'll be curious to look back maybe 10 years from now at the program and see how it's all revealed itself. Yes, what we're actually doing, because we're trying a lot of different ideas
Right,
at the moment. Yes.
Well, I know a guy who can help if you want me to put you in touch with him.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect.
Well, it is. I think it's it will be interesting, and the way you've described it there is, I think, illustrative of how of the challenge. And, again, as I said before, I sort of reject the false dichotomy of either, something more traditional or something more progressive.
Right.
It's not either or, it's yes and. And when we talk about inquiry, we use the terminology knowledge-rich inquiry, because we want students to really use and acquire knowledge through the process. And, we would say that as a result of really great learning, they come away with knowledge, but the knowledge isn't necessarily that wasn't the aim. It was a number of other things. And so we want to look at the use of explicit teaching and inquiry activities and collaboration and all of those things as they relate to, you might call surface deep and transfer learning if you're looking at Hattie's work, or the depths of knowledge, or, there's different frameworks. But the things that you mentioned, like you have these students who are coming and you don't have any holdovers, right? You have every year is different. And so they come with their unique background, prior knowledge and abilities. And so what you have to do is to figure out where they are. And, for example, when we talk about inquiry, students may or may not have had experience with inquiry. And if they haven't, then you've got to sort of dial that back a little bit.
Exactly.
And the sophistication of the experience is likely going to need to be very different. And so do you have teachers? I mean, you've explained the way you've talked about it makes me think that there's a lot of facilitation going on and maybe sort of individual or small group projects. Are there classes where there's a teacher teaching to a group of students on the boat, or does that happen?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Gabs. Yeah.
No, it's fine. So we do have all the more traditional courses that we offer on board. They are, well, again, very paradoxically, I think, traditional on the ship. So we do have, pre-calc, AP calc, foundational mathematics, physics, all these classes, English, world languages, and they have an allocated time within the schedule. So we work in a 6-day academic week. It doesn't matter which day of the week it really is, if that makes sense. So if we started with academic day 1 on a Tuesday, as soon as we reach academic day 6, we start with academic day 1 the next day. And the way it works is that it has 4 hours allocated each academic week for pre-AP classes and 5 hours for AP classes. So it's pretty much a block schedule, a normal block schedule in that sense. And so we do all these projects, either it was last year through field studies that had 1 to 2 hours a week allocated to teach research skills and then to present their research, the ones that they were doing. And now with BoardQuest, they have time within the S3 classes. That's a class that I was talking about before, the Self Systems and Society one. They have time within the S3 to develop the skills for BoardQuest and also to present their BoardQuest. And that's mixed with S3 and advisory time that they have. And that advisory time is within their watches, which is another allocator on board. So there is, we're working again with a mix of the things on the ship right now, and we're just trying to slowly transition and also see where that transition take us. It may take us to, we have some courses that are completely project based, and then we have other courses that are a mix depending on what our students need. We're not sure where it will take us, but we are trying to move to find a curriculum that is more aligned to everything else that we do on the ship and to the actual growth of the student. If that and if that requires a mix, then a mix it will be.
Yeah. So going back to the 5 goals here again, academics, and we've been talking mostly about that, but global studies, communal living, maritime training, reflective learning. One of the things that often comes up in conversations with people, if you're familiar with the term science of learning or cognitive science and more traditional, explicit instruction advocates, is whether or not things are measurable. And, I make the argument that there are lots of things that are important and that schools have different priorities and academic outcomes, and have actually used the 5 goals as an example, because some schools, lots of schools are, and I would venture to guess that most schools are not, prioritizing maritime training as a goal.
Yes.
So, but how do you measure those things? Like when they are at the end of the year, is there some sort of tool that you use to measure how they've been successful, how you've been successful, how the experience has been successful, especially in something like self-reflection or a global perspective?
Yes.
Right. So it is different. So that's also something that we're working on as well, as to formalize certain aspects of the program, and the data collection side of it as well. That's also something, that's another project that we're working on too. Because for example, when it comes to the maritime training, that pillar, and again, there are 5 pillars, but they're also connected as well. They're not separate. So for, one of the main goals and purposes behind the maritime training is you have the, learning grit and resilience and the team building. There's a ton of teamwork that happens on a day-to-day basis. Another big part of that is the idea of shipmate self, right? So putting our home first, and then, taking care of our home, taking care of the ship, and we take care of our shipmates, and then we put ourselves last. And that works because other people are lifting you up as you're lifting them up. But that's also blends with the communal living, and the grit resilience also blends with the academics. So it is all connected when it comes to evaluating their maritime skills itself, because we also get a wide array of experience with sailing too from our students. We'll have some students that have sailed for most of their lives, very rarely ever on a tall ship, but at least they have some experience out on the water. And then you'll have other students who have never sailed before in their life. And I think it's so brave of them to come and do something like this, because there's a big physical aspect of it too. Seasickness is a real thing.
Right.
And you don't know how your body's going to react. That's actually one of the big reasons we don't start the classes, the academics, about 2 to 3 weeks into the program year, is to give the body time to adjust and to really focus on developing those maritime skills so we can sail safely, building the community, and giving our bodies so we can adjust to life at sea. It's hard to teach calculus when you've got students that are zombified there, just trying to survive. So with the maritime skills, is we do have it's called Matrus. It's a collection of,
and young men.
And young men, yeah. So it's like different levels with it. So that is built within the maritime training. So we have a certain level that all the students have to get to, and it's skill-based. So they have to demonstrate certain skills, certain knowledge. For example, memorizing all the lines, which there are a lot of lines on a ship, sails, all the parts of the ship. But then for the students that are more interested in sailing, there are then pathways that they can take to learn and develop those skills even more. Also, just the way the voyage plan is designed also lends itself to testing and assessing where the students are when it comes to that specific pillar. For example, the Southern Crossing is, knock on wood, it's typically a very wonderful, great, great sail, calm, which is at that point of the school year. But then at the very end, it's the last crossing of the year, and it's this big moment is doing that northern crossing. So coming back home to Kristiansand, Norway, and that's when you're hitting typically much more challenging weather conditions. So it is a test of those maritime skills. It is a test of our grit and resilience. It then to also test our communal living, right? You've got people who are really tired when you feel like a ping pong ball for days and days because of the weather. It does test how well we treat each other, how well we work as a team, all of that. So there's that element that's built into the program itself, but we are looking at other ways that we can, again, better formalize certain parts of that. But when it comes to the other pillars, like, for example, communal living, reflective learning, that is something where it's not like we have the same type of assessment that we're using every single year to then collect data to then compare across the years, which is something that we're looking at, because that is something that we realize that we lack a lot of, is actual data that we can then use as the school gets older to see how different things that we're trying are working and how that compares. It's been more very subjective of more how has the community felt this year, our observations of it. I don't know, Gabby, if you have anything to add to that. It's a challenge.
It is a challenge that we have,
yes.
definitely. And the only thing maybe that I would add is that a lot of it comes back again to the self-systems and society class.
That's very true.
Because there's a lot of like intentional reflection and intentional conflict resolution and intentional community discussions and all of this stuff that happens in that class. So even though that class is still very much completion work, if that makes sense, there is a lot of intentional dynamics that are happening throughout the school year for us to make sure that that's happening. Where we're falling is to having that data at the end of the school year organized, if that makes sense. And we know that that's something that we're lacking, and we're working on that because it's truly difficult, because it is a very qualitative work.
Yes.
Not as easy as having a grade, or, you get a good result or a bad result in a math test,
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're working truly hard to try to figure out. But there is a lot of intentional work happening throughout the school year for us to make sure that we're not falling down in that learning process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is sort of a paradox. Excuse me. It is sort of a paradox in some ways, and I run into this in my conversations with folks who are much more traditional, again, because they will say, well, how can you measure that? And if you can't measure it, then what are we doing here? And math facts is quantitative and easily measurable, something like that. But some of these things that we're talking about, cooperation or grit and resilience or self-reflection, is more qualitative and thus harder to measure quantitatively. But to me, that doesn't mean they're not learnable. Are they teachable? That's another question. But we certainly, I think, want to foster those and grow those, whether or not they're easily measurable. And to add to that, there's what I think is a dynamic of some of those things that over time sort of gradually accumulate and crystallize with more experience. And so while math facts, for example, can be something you can measure immediately, something like grit and resilience is something that accumulates over time, and the fruits of the labor may not be seen till 5 years, 10 years after they're out of school. But the opposite of that might be true, and I would argue in some ways is true with lots of the polarization that we see here in the States, and I think in some other places in the world, is that the lack of the accumulation and crystallization of that also materializes 5-10 years down the road. And then how do you correct for that? you mentioned, Emily, you mentioned, I think, memorizing, and I think you used the word lines, and I'm assuming that's the ropes and
the ropes. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that is a topic of debate, and people get angry and yell at each other on social media and the internet about, is whether or not students should be memorizing things. And again, I think there's lots of room in between memorizing or not memorizing and how we memorize. But I'm curious if you can explain, why is it important for your students to memorize those lines? And is there a specific process that they use to memorize those lines?
Yes. So when you're working on a ship or you're part of that environment, there is a whole other language, essentially, that you're needing to learn, that unless you have experience in that world, you just don't know it, which is completely fair. So it comes down to the different parts of the ship, like I said, with the lines, so the ropes, the sails, different directions, how they're used. So it's important that we are able to learn this, that we know this common language so that we can communicate, essentially. And you're doing it in a very short amount of time. Again, we only have these students for 10 months. So I do think it's important to memorize. That essentially you're learning vocabulary, but then you're also not only learning that vocabulary, you're learning it, how to apply that vocabulary at the same time. So again, it's not a one or the other, it's a blend that's happening.
Yeah, go ahead. I think you were probably going to answer the other part, which is there a process that they go through that is sort of codified in memorizing them?
Right. So and people are different too, right? So we learn things in different ways, and there are different techniques that I think help each of us memorize things maybe more effectively. But what they do is they're physically in the space of the ship as well. So you get walked through, and you're able to touch, feel, learn all these different things with the name that's applied to them. We also have the diagrams themselves, and the students make it, they draw. So that's another step that they take, is that they create their own drawing, essentially, of the ship, and their own diagram, and then they can point out which of the words are. What I think is really helpful for a lot of students is, again, because you're physically in the space, is you're walking around and you're physically identifying each of these spaces. And then at the same time, you're at day watch and night watch. So you're also getting that practice every single day with how we're using that vocabulary. But it's a lot to learn, and it can be overwhelming at the moment for the students, because you're talking about 27 sails, you're talking about, gosh, I can't remember now. It's been a while since I've been on board the ship, but it's like over 300 lines. I'm trying to remember now. So it's a lot going on. There are also patterns to it as well. So that's also something that the students are helped with, is they discover the patterns too, but if they need a little bit of maybe nudging in certain directions to help notice those patterns, then it does help them with learning all of it too.
One of the things that I believe that helps as well is just the need for it.
Yes, that's a very good point.
In the middle of a storm, and you don't have time to say, oh, which is the line that I need to grab so that I can move this signal, so that you need to know.
Yes.
So there are things in life that we need to memorize just for safety. Like a doctor doesn't have the opportunity in the middle of a surgery to find out in Google what, like they know. And it's the same thing here. The students need to know they manage the ship with the guidance, of course, of the maritime crew. They're never alone managing the ship, but they manage the helm, they go up on the rigging, they manage the sails, the lines, everything. So a
lot of responsibility.
And that's one thing that I always, when the students say, like, you don't trust us, there's that point throughout the school year because they want to stay out until like past curfew at a port or things like that. And it's like, you really think that I don't trust you? Like, I fall asleep and you are manning the of the ship, sometimes in the middle of storms, and I'm sleeping. That's how
with my life.
It's just that we need to have a system, for your safety. But
Yeah.
So I think that need part helps a lot with.
Yes, they understand why it's important.
Yeah. So I think that's a really wonderful sort of illustration of some of what I think is, again, a sort of false dichotomy, and a much more traditional approach, sort of science of learning, quote unquote, would very likely approach this from a rote memorization standpoint, saying, here's a book, and memorize these things from just a
Right.
absent the need, absent the application, absent the experience. Right. And then once they do that, once they have that knowledge, then they're ready to go do the application and those kinds of things, which I think, to be fair, can work. But what you're describing is memorizing in a way that is applying, and it is the experience, and of course the need and the motivation being a big piece of it. And so when I think about motivation, or I'm sorry, when I think about knowledge and think about memorization or any of those things, it's really a matter of how much and in what ways are the learners thinking about things. And so if you're having to do it the way that you're explaining it, means you're connecting it with other things. And when we talk about the retrieval of whatever it is that we're supposed to be memorizing, that gives more sort of neural pathways and connections and retrieval cues, all of the things.
Yes,
and
exactly.
and it's a much more powerful way to memorize. So when I hear people say things like, oh, they don't need to memorize things, I say I would disagree. But I also think there are different ways to memorize than just rote memorization. So that's my editorial for the day. I know we're running short on time here. I do have a question. So a couple questions. So what kind of students tend to be on the ship and do this experience? Because I'm going to guess it's not free, and it's probably costs a fair amount. So there's some selection that I'm sure takes place. What do they tend to be looking for? And I'm also curious, what's the attrition rate? Because I can imagine some of these kids get on a boat and they think that they are ready for it, and they get on there and they're like, oh, this is not what I need in my life right now.
Right. I was actually surprised by that when I first joined the program. I thought there would be more students each year that would be leaving, but it's actually an incredibly few. A small handful of students each year that leave. I think a lot of that comes down to the admissions process, that there's a big focus on making sure that it's something that the student really wants for themselves, which is vital, because you give up a lot to come and do a program like this. You give up privacy. You give up access to a fridge whenever you want. You give up a lot of choice, and there's a lot that you gain from the experience, but there is a lot that you sacrifice as well. And it's hard. I think Gabby says this in interviews. I think she puts it so well, that some mornings you wake up like, I can't believe I'm here. This is the most amazing experience ever. And then there are other mornings you wake up like, I can't believe I'm here. Why did I do this to myself? Right? Because it's hard. It's incredibly challenging. Yes, I want to go home. And it's not worth it if it's not something that you really want for yourself. So we look a lot for what is the motivation of the student for coming to do the program. So is it the family that's pushing the student? Is the student running away from something? Because you see that a lot with crew too, with people applying for that as well. We forget that we can't run from ourselves. And this is a program that it's very easily romanticized as well. So there's a big focus on that. So it's actually a very low rate. For what we look for in the students, it is, like I said, with the motivation, we're looking for students that are curious. That's a big one. We're looking for, I think for students that, like in the admissions process, is how are they already showing signs of some self-reflection? I think that's a big one. When it comes to the essay that they're writing, are they just talking about what, or are they talking about the why behind it? So we're looking at certain signs. We're looking for signs. Is a student who's willing to work hard, right? We'll have some students that have never cleaned a toilet in their life before coming to the ship, they've never needed to work in a kitchen and do dishes and all of this. And then you'll have other students with more experience. So it's an interesting mix of backgrounds, because like you also pointed out, people do pay to come and do this program, and it is an expensive program. Our only funding right now comes from tuition. It's the only way that we operate. So the tuition goes completely to paying the teachers' salaries, to paying for the experiences that we do in ports, for the maintenance to the ship, all of that. Another project we're working on is, in Gabby's doing a lot with this, is with the alumni program, is how can we develop scholarships for students, because it is something that we want this opportunity to be open to more people than what it is currently, to not only be diverse when it comes to the different nationalities that we're getting, but also different monetary backgrounds as well. There's so much to learn from that. So we're working on a lot of different things. But I would say, I don't know, Gabby, what your response, but I would say curiosity is a big one. You're looking for hard work. You're looking that they have a strong idea of what their why is, what their motivation is. Anything to add, Gabs?
Yeah, that's the main thing. And I think one of the biggest reasons for our students to come is the adventure is a big component.
Yes.
A lot of them do feel trapped in a classroom. I think that's a comment that we get very often during the interviews. What's the word? But all this, like, this life that we have right now with social media, with internet all the time, being stuck to a computer, or like most of them, they want the idea of us not using phones on board. That's another thing. They don't have their phones while we're sailing. Yes. They have their phones only at port. And there was 1 year that we tried, like, you know what, let's allow them to have their phones. They don't have service anyways, it's fine. They will need to follow the rules of not using it in class, like the normal thing. And halfway through the school years, the students were collecting the phones and giving it to their teachers voluntarily. Yeah. They didn't want to have it because it was, according to them, affecting the community. So I think there's also a lot that comes with like that online presence that they're having right now that is so heavy. A lot of pressure. And I think it has gone so fast that we don't know yet how to manage that. If that makes sense. And they are living that. And it's heavy. So they do want something different. They want to experience something different. And I think that's a big motivation that we have from a lot of our students and families to come. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm mindful of time and want to get you out of here. The website is A+ World Academy, all spelled out. We'll put that in the show notes. Any other things you want to share? Anything you want to say? Any other links? Any last parting thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think we're good. We have Instagram as well. If people want to check out our Instagram.
Yes.
But only from the ports.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
What we need to do is spend enough time together that we can start to translate our ideas into each other's language and include one another in this community of inquiry. And that is the work of love.